You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. Welcome, everybody, to the On Purpose Podcast, episode 168. And before we jump in, I want to thank all of our Patreon members who make this financially possible each and every week. And make sure you understand how much we appreciate your support, and that without you, we couldn't continue to grow our purposeful community around the world. Those of you who have not joined Patreon yet, please jump over to their website. You can look up the On Purpose Podcast. We have memberships at many levels available for your support. We appreciate it. Today we're going to jump into a skill I've had to practice much in my life, and something that we as a society could get better about having and listening to, and that is the art of difficult discussions. How to approach and have those difficult conversations that you know you need to have that are holding you back, either professionally or personally, and that quite honestly can, change or ruin friendships and relationships forever, based on what could be simple misunderstandings, but because they're not communicated, nobody knows. So this week we're going to talk about the art of difficult discussions. First off, how do you know when you need to have a discussion? How do you know when something needs to be talked about versus just letting pass with the course of time to ease whatever pain there may be? I think sometimes we've all made mistakes misreading a situation. Maybe we let something slide that should have been addressed, and it ends up changing it irreparably. Or other times we act irrationally. Sorry about that. We act irrationally and try to stop something immediately, which doesn't go well, which causes emotional outbursts or arguments because it's happening right now, and that changes it. So how do we know when to have these discussions and when not to? So let's think about this. Is if you find yourself losing sleep, super anxious even thinking about somebody, or maybe it's somebody at work or a place you frequent and you're dreading even seeing them because what needs to be said is weighing down on you so much. Many times, you find yourself gossiping about that person, talking about issues or them when they're not in your presence to other people. We kind of disguise that as just venting or unburdening something. But the reality is, if you're telling those stories to somebody other than the person whose behavior is impacting you, it's an indicator maybe you need to be talking to them. Right? They're actually taking up mental and physical energy from you as you discuss their situations with others, knowing they can't change the situation. Right? So if you find yourself there, that's probably a good indicator you need to have that discussion with the specific person. So then how do you have the discussions? What do you think of in preparation for sitting down with someone? I would say the first thing you got to think of is the physical space, the location of the conversation, and if possible, try to have it as neutral as can be. Right? You don't want a home court advantage. If you're the boss, bringing everybody into your office every time you have to deliver critical feedback. If it's a personal relationship, find a neutral place, a way that doesn't evoke emotion in either of you and doesn't require somebody to automatically assume a defensive posture. Allow time, space for you to just listen to the other person. Sometimes we think these difficult discussions, this difficult talks are all about us talking and getting our point and our feelings across, but many times the resolution is going to be in listening and starting to understand how and why whatever behavior is impacting you took place from their perspective. And you can't do that if you're booking what needs to be a half-hour conversation into a 15-minute time slot, right? So make sure you create the time space that allows for you to listen and understand the other person's perspective, almost at a priority over sharing yours. And then make sure you create the mental space. Check in with yourself, clear your head of all other distractions, and come into the discussion with the mental space that allows you to assume an open posture, that allows you to be mentally alert and listening to cues and clues, both said and unsaid, of what they're telling you. Being open to understand from their perspective helps you move to outcomes and desired outcomes, which means you got to know going into the discussion what outcome it is you seek. Right? If we're just going in to be heard, okay, that's an outcome. We just want to be able to express our feelings and be understood. That's an outcome. If we're trying to seek a behavior change, that would be an outcome. If maybe it's professional and we're terminating somebody or ending that relationship, there's an outcome. So when we go into these big discussions, we should know what kind of outcome we're seeking. Right? And I like to also think, if I was on the other side, what would be the best outcome for me there? Or what would I want to see if I was the other person? So that I can try to understand the whys and the whats of whatever it is we're discussing, and why it took place in the first place, what it is they want to get out of, what they hope to obtain by the behavior or the lack of behavior. Right? Understanding the outcomes will also then start opening you up to whatever middle ground there could be to create a solution to both sides being happy. Allow for space for the unforeseen possibility or compromise. Right? Even though we prepare, and I kind of know what I want to say, and I know what kind of outcomes on both sides are expected, allow space that maybe you didn't see everything. Maybe you didn't know a certain aspect that now changes what kind of compromise is possible. So you see, a lot of the ability to having difficult discussions is about listening and being open and having space. Time, space to allow a discussion to take place. The mental space to be open to allow exchanges to occur. And then the flexibility within you to admit maybe you didn't see all the possibilities and you're open to compromises. So why in the first place would you even have difficult discussions? Maybe it's performance issues at work. Maybe it's behavioral issues, in the family as a parent. Maybe it's boundaries in relationships. I would say the ultimate reason you should have to have a difficult discussion is when you love somebody enough to be honest with them. You love them and care for them enough to tell them the truth. and you respect them enough to hear the truth. You see, many of the most difficult discussions we won't have are with the very people we're supposed to love the most and care for the most. But because they're hard, sometimes we'll leave the very things that should be said to the most important people in our world left unsaid. So think about it, take inventory, reflect. If you should be having those difficult discussions with people in your world, and start taking steps towards having them. Setting up the discussion to be successful and have outcomes that both parties can live with. And ultimately, the worst case scenario is somebody knows that you love and care about them enough to even have approached them on a difficult discussion. Thank you all for joining us this week. I hope you're enjoying your summer, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.